Hi, my name is Darren Nguyen, and this is my presentation on Althea Gibson and her effect on the racial barriers in sports. I wanted to start off with a quote from Althea Gibson that defined her whole career, which is, "I determined that I was going to be somebody too, if it killed me." Althea Gibson was born on August 25th, 1927, in Silver, South Carolina, and raised in the Harlem section of New York City. Gibson started her journey in the sport of tennis as a 12-year-old city paddle tennis champ before switching to a racket and winning her first tennis tournament at 14. Althea Gibson was the first black person to win a Grand Slam title at the French Open in 1956 and was the first black person to win in both singles and doubles at Wimbledon in 1957 and 1958. Althea Gibson's achievements were very significant because tennis was a sport that connected more closely to social status, wealth, and the exclusivity of country clubs. It was mainly played by the white and wealthy in the United States during the 1900s when Althea Gibson was first starting her career. This is a photo of Althea Gibson in her first round at Wimbledon in 1956. With an impressive record of 56 wins and 5 Grand Slam titles, and despite her reluctance to be an activist athlete, like the famous Jackie Chan, whom she was constantly compared to, Althea Gibson was truly a trailblazer for African Americans in the sport of tennis. In the beginning of her professional tennis career in 1950, despite doing well in small events and even being invited to play in some summer grass court tournaments, the United States Tennis Association ignored her and acted like she did not exist. According to an article written by Althea Gibson, she said, "Alice Marble, one of the greatest women tennis players the country has ever produced, wrote an editorial in the July 1950 issue of American Lawn Tennis magazine, which said in part, 'If Althea Gibson represents a challenge to the present crop of women players, it's only fair that they should meet that challenge on the courts.'" Marble's input on Gibson's situation pushed one of the biggest tennis clubs in the Eastern Circuit, the Orange Lawn Tennis Club in South Orange, New Jersey, to accept Gibson's entry for the Eastern Grass Court Championships, which made her the first African American to play tennis on the United States national level. This was the beginning to breaking tennis's color barrier. Although Gibson first attended the Wimbledon in 1951, she quickly lost in the early rounds and did not make it back to Wimbledon for another 5 years. Her next big breakthrough was when she became the Wimbledon singles champion in 1957. The Wimbledon in 1957 was also the first time Queen Elizabeth II attended a Wimbledon and even presented the trophy to Gibson. Gibson's victory at the Wimbledon and achievement of becoming the first black champion in Wimbledon's 80-year history in 1957 is what led six-time Wimbledon winner Billie Jean King to believe that Althea Gibson was the one who broke tennis's racial barrier. According to Garnell Stamps, a reporter who interviewed Althea Gibson for Viewpoint, a public affairs program sponsored by the NAACP, "At the time, we didn't have people who could run for president of the United States. We did not have many nationally known people. There were few in the arenas and on the field of play and in other things. We had to look up to those." Gibson was one of the few African Americans known on a national level, which brought pride to many African Americans, especially in Harlem, where she grew up. During a time when racial discrimination was very prominent, Gibson was able to bring hope for a change due to going against the odds and winning an international level competition in a sport that was dominated by white people. Due to the path that Althea Gibson opened up in tennis, she was able to inspire other great African American tennis players such as Zina Garrison, Arthur Ashe, Malivi Washington, the Williams sisters, Chanda Rubin, James Blake, and others. In an article written by Zina Garrison, the second African American woman to reach the Wimbledon finals, she said, By having the good fortune of being able to stand on Althea Gibson's strong, powerful, proud, vain shoulders, I've learned to understand the importance of passing the torch. It is on those shoulders that the Williams sisters and I now stand, holding the doors open and pushing them to new limits. Gibson opened up the doors to allow more African Americans to play professional tennis. She showed all of the people in America that African Americans had the ability to play tennis on an international level and inspired many great tennis players to step up to the challenge of the white dominated sport of professional tennis. After all of her success in the sport of tennis, she moved on to becoming a professional golfer, yet another sport that was still closed to African Americans. In 1963, during the same year as Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous I Have a Dream speech, which further raised racial tensions and discrimination from many white people, Althea Gibson became the first African American golfer to join the Ladies Professional Golf Association. Although she was not able to win an event during her golfing career, she was still breaking racial barriers by professionally playing in a white dominated sport while racial tensions were high. She knew of the racial discrimination that she would face, but would not let it stop her from achieving her goals. This can be seen in her statement, "If I made it, it's half because I was game enough to take a lot of punishment along the way, and half because there were a lot of people who cared enough to help me," which she wrote in her 1958 memoir, I Always Wanted to Be Somebody. Due to her experiences in discrimination during her tennis career, the discrimination that she faced during her golf career no longer faced her. As stated earlier, Gibson did not want to become an activist athlete. Renee Paulwell, a close friend of Gibson's, and the second African American to qualify for the Ladies Professional Golf Association in 1967, said, "Because of the fact that she was in tennis and broke color barriers in tennis, when she went to golf, things didn't bother her. She was focused on playing the game. She wasn't trying to open doors. She was just trying to play the game and make a living." Although she was not trying to open doors and just play the game, just by being the first African American in the Ladies Professional Golf Association was enough to inspire the future generations. Stackhouse, the eighth African American to get her Ladies Professional Golf Association tour card, stated, "The longer it would have taken for black people to enter the game professionally, the slower the development would have been." She is saying that because Gibson was the first to do it, she was able to speed up the process of breaking down the racial barriers and having more African Americans joining the sport of golf on a professional level. As Althea Gibson's professional tennis and golf careers were during the United States Civil Rights Movement, many African Americans believed that she should become a spokesperson for them in order to push for the rights of African Americans. Looking at Althea Gibson's professional career in both tennis and golf, it can be seen that she broke down many racial barriers in both of these sports. However, she was still subject to much hostility from the African American community due to her refusal to become an activist athlete. Gibson wrote in her 1958 memoir, I Always Wanted to Be Somebody, "I am uncomfortably close to being public enemy number one to some sections of the black press," which she said she believed was because she refused to be an activist athlete like Jackie Robinson, who broke the racial barriers in baseball just a couple years prior to Gibson becoming the Wimbledon champion. Not only did Gibson have to face a lot of discrimination from white people in her career, especially when racial tensions were high due to the United States Civil Rights Movement, she also had to face gender discrimination from her own African American community. The Civil Rights Movement, fronted by middle-class African Americans, endorsed heteronormative and patriarchal importance as a path to integration. Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, advocated marriage and motherhood rather than careers for women. As one of the leaders of the Civil Rights Movement, his actions and words were respected and became the general mindset. This was the exact opposite of what Althea Gibson was, because she was focused on her career rather than marriage and motherhood. While the U.S. Civil Rights Movement gave her support as an African American breaking down racial barriers in sports, it did not give her support as a strong woman. This can be seen in a review of black athletic distinctions. Doc Young, Jet's newspaper magazine sports editor, listed Althea Gibson as one of the two biggest flops in sports. She was questioned for her athletic legitimacy and her claim to be female. Young's article reflected concurrent opposition in the black media to the problem of women taking on male prerogatives. This means that black media did not believe that women should be leaders in the U.S. Civil Rights Movement to break down racial barriers because they believed that was a man's job. Despite all of the discrimination that Althea Gibson faced, she was able to break down the racial barriers in both tennis and golf, which allowed her to achieve her goal of becoming somebody. Thank you.